Hello and welcome to the very special episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast, the 175th episode. It is not special because it's the 175th, but it is hosted by I, Kellen, the Red Tank, joined as always by Mark and Neelan.
Hey.
Hello.
And on this very special 175th episode, we're going to be talking to you about some cool board games. Neelan is going to talk to us about Nations. Yes, that's right. Nations with Neelan. I will be following that up, talking about Mountain Goats, a push-your-luck game, and we'll chase that with Mark talking to us about Brew. And after that, we're going to count down our top 5 cutest board games of all time.
You know, for such a soft subject as the top 5 cutest games are, I feel like there's going to be contention around definitions of cute. I feel like this is going to be a pretty fiery episode.
Christina said, under no circumstances could I put in any anime waifus in my top 5 list. We love doing unique top 5 lists because it allows us to highlight some board games that we love and like that go along a different theme than just reciting Biblios to you over and over again. Biblios, innovation, and not the resistance, because Neelan is a traitor to himself.
And also, I think you're very sorely mistaken if you don't think Mark's going to find a way to convince us all that monks are the cutest thing in the world.
Monks are adorable.
The cutest profession.
St. Ignatius, cherubic, got those cheeks.
You're making up these words.
Which word did I make up? St. Ignatius, cheeks, cherubic.
Ignatius?
Ignatius is a name. Ignatius is a cool name because it starts with an I.
It's
and
a person?
Got like a T-I-U-S. Yeah.
Oh, is it a monk?
Yeah. Don't question my monk knowledge.
Okay. Where were we? Where was I?
Well,
here we are.
Start talking about Biblios. You know it's going to trick you.
Okay. So, before we get to our top 5 list, let us talk about some board games. Neelan, I'm very eager to hear what you have to say about Nations with Neelan.
Yeah, Nations is...
With Neelan.
Nations with Neelan is a
news program.
I'm going to be doing this every single week. This week on Nations with Neelan. Yes, thank you.
It's always South Africa, though. It's a problem.
That's the only nation that matters. Nations is a tableau card game that has a civilization theme. It sounds, by that description, pretty similar to Through the Ages, because it is very similar to Through the Ages. I think one of the things that I think is worth saying right off the bat before I even describe anything about Nations is it is very, very apparent from playing Nations that the intent was someone almost certainly played Through the Ages and thought, what is maybe the slightly friendlier, the slightly more accessible, the more pared down version of that game, which is, famously long and inaccessible. It is a harsh game. So,
and a top 5 board game that Neelan will never play with the board game.
One day, Kellen, I will break out the actual physical board game of Through the Ages and play it. It was actually genuinely, because one of the things after playing Nations with Marnie, who Discord members will know as one of our moderators, was I'm very keen to actually break out Through the Ages now and teach it to her, which is exactly why I have that copy. But regardless, let's step back a little bit and talk about what Nations is. It is a game about building a civilization tableau by acquiring cards from a market, placing them onto your board, and then recruiting your population to occupy either those buildings or soldier units or what have you in order to generate income, in order to generate your military strength, in order to generate your culture, all of which at the end of 4 ages of the game is going to determine whoever has the most victory points. Again, a lot of this is going to sound exceedingly similar to Through the Ages if you've played that game. In Nations, the market of cards is sort of a very simple, just 3 rows of 4. The ones at the bottom cost 1 coin. The ones above that cost 2 coins. The ones above that cost 3 coins. On every round of the game, the bottom 2 rows reset and the cards move down. So they're getting cheaper as they go, but they're also largely changing from age to age. And what those cards represent are military units. So I might say, okay, I'm going to buy this upgraded military unit of cavalrymen and place that replacing my basic swordsman. And then I would, for another action, take one of my people, put it onto that cavalry card, and now I have a cavalry unit. My military goes up, and so on. Why do you want a better military? Because some of the cards you can buy from the market might be a battle card. The way that works is if I buy that card, depending on the strength of my military, I get some benefits. If it is a war card, then you set the military marker at what your current value is, and anyone that's below that marker at the end of the round gets some sort of penalty. One thing that's important to point out is that is in pretty stark contrast to the way that aggressions and wars work in something like Through the Ages, which is to say that they're not targeted. If I start a war, it affects everyone at the table, and there's just some penalty if they don't meet that thing. It's not like me picking on a player. If I start a battle, I'm not picking on Mark and hurting his board. It kind of just like sets a game state, and you can adapt and play to it as you choose to. And that kind of touches a lot of the philosophy of how Nations works. It is designed to be more of a traditional sort of Euro experience, which is to say that it is very friendly. You are not going to be as badly hurt as you might be in a game of Through the Ages. One of the things that can be obnoxious about that game to new players, especially at different skill levels, if you get hit early, you'll just get beaten down. You're often encouraged to pick on the weakest player in Through the Ages. Nations smartly avoids a lot of that while preserving a lot of that feel of, okay, I want to get this cheap market card before Mark takes it from me. Or I want to get this expensive card, but it's maybe a bit too expensive to get now, so do I wait for it to get cheaper? But if I do that, then there's a chance that another player might get it before me, and so on. The buildings you require will increase the income you're generating from round to round, which will be the coins you're using, the food you're spending to feed your people, the stone you're using to move people around your board. And that's kind of the basic gist of the game. You're collecting victory points in the form of chips and end-of-game scoring based on the buildings you've placed, based on your military strength, based on your culture. And you play 4 different ages as the cards get progressively better and better as the ages progress. And that is largely how Nations works. The one thing I want to say off the bat is I can't help but compare this game to Through the Ages. And I think that's kind of for obvious reasons. Through the Ages is one of my absolute favorite games. And this hews so close to following the formula that it's hard not to draw comparisons. And I think that if I were to be comparing it 1-to-1, it's hard for me not to step back from Nations feeling like I would rather have just been playing Through the Ages. That said, I definitely admired what it was doing, reducing the playtime, making the game just feel a little bit more accessible is something that, while it might not necessarily be for me because of my aforementioned love of a different game, I can definitely see the appeal of this.
So I've played Nations and have not played Through the Ages, and I knew going into playing Nations that it was in a lot of ways similar to Through the Ages. And I remember, I don't remember the game very clearly. I do remember enjoying Nations, but thinking to myself, well, that's a good game. And again, I'm a sucker for historical things, so seeing the historical things pop up and the characters pop up was neat. But thinking to myself, hey, that's a good game. It's, maybe like a 7, like a solid Euro 7, something that I wouldn't turn down, but not really itching to play. And somehow that translating in my mind as well, then should I really be itching to play Through the Ages? I mean, I knew even then that Through the Ages would be a different experience and probably a superior one given all the accolades it's gotten, but it sort of dampened my excitement to get to Through the Ages. You're saying, though, that even though there's a lot of shared DNA, they feel much different. Because you're okay on Nations, but you still love Through the Ages.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, totally. And it's one of those things where I almost don't even want to be too harsh on Nations because I recognize what it is. It's just that I know that for myself, and I almost can say with some certainty for you, Mark, based on what I know about your taste in games, that I think you would vastly prefer Through the Ages. And I think I can boil down actually what the key differences instead of just accessibility are for me. I would say that Through the Ages has a bigger focus on sort of like a long-term strategy. It actually better exemplifies the idea in my head of what a civilization game is, which is where you look back at the end of the game, you're like, oh, I saw how I was started here and I was progressing to here. I knew I wanted to get to here. You see that all laid out on your board in front of you. It feels like you've lived through this long period of time. Nations feels a little bit more arbitrary like that. It is a more tactical game. A card will show up on the market, and then because of the way turn order works, one of the key differences, and actually the two structurally, is Nations is I take an action, you take an action, I take an action, you take an action, where Through the Ages you kind of use all of your action points and then it's the next player's turn. So you can do a lot more on your turn before you have to worry about the other players. So by that virtue alone, Nations is a little bit more reactionary. What I take from the market is going to depend on what you took, literally the turn before. Right. And sometimes it could even be like, I built up my military because I'm going to pounce on everyone next turn and build a big war. But then the war cards don't even come out in the market when that following round. And that's frustrating. That's one of the things I found frustrating in Nations, whereas it's so baked into the DNA of Through the Ages that the card row is just slowly sliding and you see what's coming up and you can plan ahead for it like several turns in advance. Nations just doesn't have that. And I think some players might prefer that sort of feeling of it just being moving quicker and sort of being a little bit more tactical, but not what I was looking for. Intrigued to play more of it. I've also heard a lot of good about Nations the Dice game, which I think Chase in our Discord has mentioned basically boils down the stuff he loves about Nations into, again, an even quicker game. And I think that if you were to like close that gap and just move all the way into just super quick and fast, like it might even appeal to me more. So I'd be very keen to try that as well. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Nations.
All right, so just repeat after me. Da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na.
Nations by Neil.
No.
Oh.
You do the...
Oh, I see. This
has been a special broadcast of Nations with Neelan. Now you.
Oh, I say.
What do you not understand? Repeat after me.
Do you not understand? Neelan? So
I thought we were
obvious.
done with that. Yeah, I'm sorry. That has been a special broadcast of Nations with Neelan.
And now back to you, Kellen.
And now back to
Come on,
our
Neelan.
regular scheduled program. Sorry, I missed the bar where I was supposed to predict the rest of the bit.
All right.
Prompter.
I want to talk about a game that I played with my family this weekend, and that is Mountain Goats. The publisher name is BoardGameTables.com. They did a 3-game Kickstarter for Mountain Goats, GPS, and Sequoia. And I finally had a chance to play Mountain Goats, which is a push-your-luck game, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to talk about it. If you're familiar with games like Can't Stop, this is very similar, except now with goats. So essentially, you are playing King of the Hill on 6 different hills at once. And you have got to get to the top of the 5 mountain, the 6 mountain, the 7 mountain, the 8 mountain, the 9 mountain, and the 10 mountain. I don't think I said mountain for all of those, but I tried. But there are more steps to get to the top of the 5 mountain than there are the 10 mountain. So you will roll 4 dice and then apply those results to move your goats up any of these columns to get to the top. So because it's easier to roll 5s, or it's easier to combine dice to get to 5, it's going to be easier to climb up, but it is further to get to the top of that King of the Hill than the 10, where there is only 2 steps. You have to just do 10 twice in order to get to the top of that mountain. What makes the game so interesting is that once you ascend to the top of the mountain, goats can share spaces except at the top of the mountain. There's only room for 1 goat at the top of the mountain. Let me repeat that. There is only room for 1 goat at the top of the mountain. And when you get there, you kick out all the other goats back to the bottom, you score a point, and then from then on, every time you roll a subsequent 5, if you're at the top of the 5 mountain, you can either cash that in for more points or try to claim position somewhere else on the board. So the whole game is sort of this like, well, I'm already at the top of 6 mountain, should I just take another 6? But there's a 10 over there. I could use that die to combine over here and just go up the 10 mountain. The game rewards you for getting to the top of every mountain. Every set of each mountain that you climb to the top of, you'll get some additional bonus victory points. And this is a lovely production. I have explained the entirety of the game. The game does reward you if you roll 2 1s, which are just literally the worst thing to roll. It allows you to change one of those results. So just a smidgen of a, hey, it's bad to roll lower values in this game. I think the hardest thing for me to say is, do I like this more or less than Can't Stop?
That was going to be my question.
But, Neelan, thank you for asking that question. But I will say that by putting it in that category, we've already elevated as something that I really enjoy. On a scale of mediocre to excellent, I'm sort of saying, is this better than Can't Stop? My hot take is it's probably not, but it has goats in it. But it's very good. It was really good. I immediately wanted to show it to you guys. It takes up a ton of space.
Oh, really?
For a game that's really small. It's kind of probably the size of 2 or 3 Oink games duct taped together for those who've tried an Oink game. But the entire mountain cards are quite big, which is silly. And the goats are very cute. And the production is very great. Anything else you guys want to know about mountain goats?
Yeah, just a quick question. So what's throwing me off here is that in Can't Stop you have 2 to 12 because you can roll snake eyes or boxcars. But why is the range here 5 to 10? What happens if you roll, like, are 6s not so great then?
So you can combine them in any order, right?
I see.
So if you got 4 5s, you could go up the 5-track 4 times.
I see.
And so you could end up with some leftover, which is the bad part. You know,
Right.
you could combine a 5, a 4, and a 1, go up 1 on the 10-track, and then hopefully your other die. The player who won our game got extraordinarily lucky. So I think Can't Stop does balance that a little better. Like I said, I think that if you have multiple 1s, you can change one of the results as a concession to the fact that, like, hey, it's just worse to roll 1s.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that luck distributed fairly evenly, there are interesting decisions on each turn and a little bit of area control where it's like, no one's near me on the 5, so I'm going to keep hitting that bell. And I, you know, as someone who likes video games, like the King of the Hill sort of part of it actually felt quite nice, and not something that, like, I feel like has been done super well for me in other board games. And this is a very light, you know, push your luck filler, but I just had a really great time. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this. I believe it is a re-implementation of an older, like, themeless sort of game called Level X.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's very good.
It says 10 minutes on the page.
Yeah, I think it took a little longer than that. There is an expansion to add it to 5 players, and I believe we were playing with 5 players. And everything doesn't fit in the box, so that's dumb. That is Mountain Goats, a game I quite enjoy, from BoardGameTables.com. So that was a special report. Mountain Goats with Kellen.
Wait, Kellen,
Now-
repeat after me.
Uh-oh.
You're going to go... da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na.
Oh, that sounds like
Batman.
Batman. You got me. Now going to our foreign correspondent in the field, Mark.
Yes, Kellen, I'm here in Brew, Sylvania,
Oh,
reporting
God.
on Brew by Pandasaurus Games.
This is your fault, Kellen.
Brew.
Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable right now.
So Brew is a dice roll.
Uh-oh, a breaking story.
I can just hear Kellen. I just wanted to say that we've watched 5 episodes of The Newsroom, and this is the result.
Now that makes sense.
Now the truth comes out, yeah.
That was unnecessary.
Brew is a dice worker placement game with a dash of area majority, some player powers, some card drafting. What you're doing in Brew is you're going to roll your dice, and then you're going to place them in a couple of different areas. There is a sort of a central board where you can place your dice to acquire goods. There are one of 4 different types of goods. But where the action sort of is are these cards that come out round to round where you can place your dice to get a resource that is printed on that spot, but also you're trying to achieve area majority by having the most dice on any particular card, and at the end of the round, if you have the most dice on a card, then you get the card. The card will give you a number of victory points, and also will serve as a potential habitat to animals that you can acquire throughout the game.
Magical animals.
Magical Brew Sylvania animals. The way you get the animals are there's some dice placement spots where instead of getting a resource, you can draft an animal. There's also some places on the central board, usually where you can draft an animal. The animals come in one of 4 colors. They will grant you a player power. And if you are able to match animal with its habitat, so like, for example, there are winter animals, and if you end the game with a winter animal in a winter habitat, it will go from being worth 1 victory point for having the animal to 3 victory points. In addition, there are these potions where the game Brew gets its name. You're acquiring these resources to exchange them for potions. And these potions give you one-time abilities to re-roll dice or to move where dice are placed or to do any number of things to sort of mitigate dice rolling. So that's basically the mechanisms of Brew. It is, to sort of piggyback off of our episode topic, a very, very cute game. The dice are unique. They've got different symbols on them, on all the die faces. The artwork is adorable. There is a lot of like vibrant colors. The seasonal theme comes through really well. But then there's the gameplay. I was not a huge fan of Brew. And this is interesting going into our main topic because while it is sort of, I think without question that I would not find it a game that I would enjoy, I can't help but think on some level that the beauty of the game, and this is going to sound weird, sort of made my negative feelings about it even stronger. So the way I'll explain this is like, it's such a beautiful game, and it's got all these like really cool pieces and dice and all the colors and everything. You go in there like fairly hyped up. You're excited to play it. And this is a game of like increments. Place your die on a spot, get one resource. And, for all the beauty of all the pieces, the resources are like the size of your fingernail. They're these small things. So even that feels small. And then you trade these resources in for these potions that do like one small thing once in the game. And then the player powers you can get from these animals are like super small. Like when you get a mushroom, get another mushroom. It's like everything in this game is tiny. Everything feels incremental. So even when you have maxed out your player powers, and you can have a maximum of 3 animals granting you 3 player powers, and even when you have all these potions in front of you, you don't feel any sort of engine building. You don't feel any sort of like powering up. In our game, a number of times I was looking around the table and players would have like 10 different potions in front of them. And just like you would use one here or there for one little small thing, and you never felt a crescendo. It never felt exciting. Just a really, really disappointing experience. And again, it was a situation where the cuteness of it and the production values of it. And Kellen, you were there. Let me know if you think that there's any merit in this. Just like I was really hyped to play it because it looked so good, and it just really landed with a thud to me.
Yeah, this was pretty surprising. I think that I really wanted to like it too, because I think having a game with area control in this price range and in this length and at this target market is a little unusual. I think normally you would look for mechanisms that are a little kinder, a little nicer, and this just went for it with area control. But it also didn't feel like you outsmarted your opponents when you had a good placement in the area control portion of it. It sort of felt incidental to the dice you rolled. And then because everyone had so many potions near the end of the game, you don't know all the powers that they're able to do. And so you could plan something for the entire round, and then right at the last minute, they would go, gotcha, right, and they would put out a potion. But it wasn't big moments either that felt so satisfying like you described. Honestly, we spent over 30 minutes of game night arguing about who this game might be for. And really, I'm still a little bit at a blank because it's like so beginner casual, like Ticket to Ride-y, but then it's so biddy and there's so much going on that I just don't know. I don't know who it's for. I know it's not for us, honestly, and I desperately wanted to like it. I think it's one of the coolest productions I've seen in years, honestly. It's like it's really cool and pretty, and the card art is fun, and it's just like, again, this comes back to some of the things that I've said where I would probably have to be given money to play this again.
Right.
And it's just the amount of like what that would be.
So I didn't play this. So I'm only going on like the images I'm looking at now in your description, but there's like a comparison that's like coming to my mind, which is in some of the things you described in like the Tiny Epic games, in that like kind of a cutesy vibe, but all the pieces are a little bit too fiddly and it does a little bit too much for what it looks like it should be doing. Does that feel like an apt comparison? Because that's kind of always been my reaction to a lot of those games as well, where it's kind of like, well, what are you going for here? Because there's this mismatch between the game you have and the aesthetic, and it doesn't all seem to gel together appropriately.
I don't think that the design is unfocused. I think the design is getting to where it wants to be. Just for me, it just felt so, to use the term, tiny. It felt like everything works. The area control works, and the player powers work, and the dice mitigation with these potions, it all works. It's just completely boring. It's just like never strong. Callan, for example, mentions that, you can't really plan for what the other players can do because they, start acquiring all these potions and you don't know what they can do, which is 100% true. As I was saying, we had players who had like 8 potions in front of them at some points. But at the same time, you have these stack of potion cards, but they're only like, 6 or 8 kinds of potions. It's quite often where you'll have this array of 4 potions and like 2 of them will be the exact same.
Got it.
They'll only be different based on the number of resources or the type of resources necessary. So it's another thing where like the band of like possible things you can be and do is very narrow.
Got it.
There's not a lot of like chances for like wild, awesome actions.
A lot of these ideas on paper, when I read the rulebook, I was excited about. And then we just started playing and I was like, oh, there are places where when you roll the die, you can only use that symbol to place into a slot on the area control. And if you do that, you get a resource that's going to help you buy the potions. And I'm like, okay, but if you really want to go there, you can force a die there, but instead of getting that resource, you have to pay that resource. And when I read that, I was like, that's clean. That's awesome. But in reality, it's just like everyone is sitting on tons of the different resources. Doesn't really matter what resources you have because you're probably going to be able to buy a potion. And then everyone has powers to convert them into juju berries that are wild. So then you use the wild ones. And so you're like setting things up and then everything changes. So you can't really make a plan about what you're trying to area control. There are these neutral die as well. Another system, neutral die, that you not only do you have to have the most on a card, you have to have more than any of the neutral die. And I'm like, oh, that's cool because you can spend neutral die and just try to them, try to mark, which is like I always love to do. And you just do it, and then the next player goes, oh, I used Gust of Wind and move that die over there. And then the next player goes, oh, I used Scorch Earth and cover up one of the spaces. And like by the time it gets back to you, you're just like, oh, okay. But you're also not that like upset because It's all like you're scoring 4, 5, 6, 7 points no matter where you go. Really, really, like I said, we spent a lot of time hashing out like who this game might be for and who you could say. Honestly, if you look at the production, you may pick it up. Honestly, just because it's like the art is so cool. It's like Studio Ghibli-esque, custom everything. It's really, really a stellar A+ production.
Almost a little bit of a Pokemon vibe I'm getting off some of these creatures even as well.
How dare you invoke Pokemon during this conversation?
Last thing I will say is that what put the nail in the coffin for me on this game is like a lot of times I'll play a game and I'll either do well in it or I'll do poorly in it, and I'll worry about if that paints how I feel about the game. I ended up winning this game and it felt completely undeserved. I had no idea why I won. I didn't feel like I deserved the win, and that was just like the last bit of it for me. Like I had no joy from winning the game, which is usually like one of my biggest sources of joy. So that is.
And I lost and deserved the win, which is why I hate it.
So that is me wrapping up my story from Brewsylvania about Brew from Pandasaurus. Back to you in the studio, Kellen.
Thanks, Mark, for that gripping account. I was in the College of Communications. I did know many broadcast journalism majors. So, here in the middle of the podcast, we will say that we are getting ready after this episode to record the Patreon bonus episode. We are so grateful for everyone who supports the Board Game Barrage podcast on Patreon. You can do that at patreon.com/boardgamebarrage. At certain levels, that gets you a bonus episode every month where we talk about our lives, things that are going on, books, music, video games, TV, and a little bit of board game talk. There are exclusive Patreon channels in the Discord where sort of the
inner sanctum.
Thank you, Mark. How do they...
It's all about monks.
How do they say that in Brewsylvania?
What do you want me to do with that? What am I supposed to do with that?
That's a good setup. You made up Brewsylvania. Okay.
Whatever I do.
Wait, is Brewsylvania not actually from the game?
Oh, no.
No. That was me.
That was
me inventing a world.
His mind. So just a shout, we don't often talk about our Patreon, but I think the biggest thing is thank you to everyone who supports our Patreon. We use that to upgrade our equipment. We use that to run ads for the show and contests and merch. And it really keeps the lights on for us, and it's much, much, much appreciated. And if you're interested in checking it out, you can do so at patreon.com/boardgamebarrage. And I believe also boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon will get you any way you want to come in the door.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So today's featured topic, we will be counting down the top 5 cutest board games of all time.
Do we want to get into the definition argument here?
Okay.
Right, yeah. Or as we get to it. This is not the top 5 prettiest games.
I also actually, and I don't know if this is true for the two of you, but this is not, at least it wasn't for me, the top 5 best games that are cute.
Right.
Okay,
no,
great.
Agreed.
It's a mix, though.
No.
Well, I did realize this afterwards, that it might not have been as
Brew number one. You're
going to come out here and spew garbage?
Actually, I guess that's fair. I didn't put bad games on this list.
Yeah, I put okay games. Okay. There are a lot of okay games here.
Okay, so just to be clear, everyone, the goal of an episode like this is to highlight and feature 15 games that you may not otherwise hear from us that may appeal to you thematically or mechanically. And so I think that's the problem if you say, like, this game is but it's cute. Like, that's what Mark is giving you. So when you hear a Mark game, he's saying, this game is but it's cute.
It may appeal to you aesthetically. There are people who appreciate fine art.
Yeah, I prefer people with some depth. It's not skin deep for me over here. So let us get right to it. Our feature topic, the top 5 cutest board games according to us. All right. I, as the illustrious host, will go last. Neelan, why don't you tell us your number 5 cutest board game of all time?
My number 5 game is Calico. Calico is a great little puzzle game. It wasn't my absolute favorite of this type of tile laying puzzle game, but I think there's one thing you cannot deny. If you look at Calico, it is adorable. It is cute. It is little kittens sprawling out on little cutesy patchwork quilts that you're assembling. It's great. The whole theme and aesthetic of Calico is that you are putting these little hexagonal tiles together in order to build out this quilt so that you can attract all the different kittens of different breeds onto your patterns that they like. So, I mean, what could be better? Making little patterns to attract cute, adorable cats. All the artwork by Beth Sobel is incredible. It just has a very, very colorful, very, very, very cute, painterly aesthetic. It is great.
But
it's also weirdly stressful. But ignore all that because it's cute.
You're supposed to be repeating after me still. But Neelan, the cat on the cover is not a Calico.
I know. They definitely misstepped.
The cat on the cover of the Calico board game is not a Calico?
I actually think, if I remember correctly, there is a paragraph in the rule book that accounts for the fact of that, but I might be wrong about that, which I thought was a great little addendum to have to make to your rule book to explain why the cover is not what it should obviously be.
Do you remember what the explanation
You know what? I actually might even be half making that up, but I think there is something like that. I remember seeing an explanation, which was that, they did the Calico on the cover, and it was like, okay, this just doesn't look as good as it was if we chose this other cat instead, so...
Oh, so it's anti-Calico.
The explanation is our artist Beth thought a patchy calico cat on top of a patchwork quilt would be too busy, so we went in a different direction. Okay?
There it is.
But the funny thing is that it's just like the fact that errata or whatever is in the rule book is because of just like me. Basically.
right, someone that would complain. Yeah.
Perfect. Glad we got through that.
That's my number 5 game, Calico.
You want a game with colorful dice, with colorful art, with colorful creatures, with the different seasons being represented, but a good game? Put down the brew and open up Seasons.
Oh, this is a good
Seasons is a game that is doing a lot of what Brew is trying to do. It doesn't have the area control, but it does have the adding player powers by purchasing monsters. And it's a great game where at the end you do feel way stronger than you did at the beginning. At the end of Seasons, you're creating all these incredible combos, and you're doing it using very, very lovely components. The dice are big and chunky and are custom and are great. You've got this wonderful art. You're playing as a wizard who's acquiring creatures and magical accoutrement, and it's just a great experience. It's a great experience and a game that I haven't played in too long, but one of the cutest games around, and that is Seasons.
Yeah, I love the art on Seasons. It's very much like a take on like a style of like Magic the Gathering drafting
Sure,
that I like,
yeah, exactly.
but like going into like the more cutesy fantasy aesthetic, and I think it's beautiful.
It's really hard to object, but I will.
Okay.
Okay. Seasons, as when I got into board gaming, Seasons was like, wow, this art. Like, wow. Like it just spoke to me. Okay? So I agree with you there. But thank you for repeating after me before I did. But I'm not sure it's cute. Like, I'm sure that it's really good. I'm sure that it's amazing and among the best. But I look at the cover and I don't know.
Yeah, I get it. It's a little bit, there's a touch of aggressiveness into it that may sort of steer it away from cute. And there's some art that is not dark, but a little darker than maybe the cute standard would allow. Yeah. But I would say that the pastel colors and the dice add to it and sort of put it over the top.
I mean, yeah, I think like there are cards that I would not call cute, but there are also cards that are adorable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Magic the Gathering in that way. Like there are cards, I mean, not that I would call Magic the Gathering cute on the whole, but like depending on the card, yes, I agree that you could counter this.
My number 5 cutest board game of all time is a 2010 release, Battle Sheep. Battleship. My list has too many animals in it, looking at it now. Cute has this weird combination of the illustrations, the components, the box. It like all works together to form this thing for me. Battleship is a really, really good, small, clever, hexagonal game with really adorable sheep illustrations. But when you set it up and you're just moving the sheep around, I really feel like you could get someone much younger than the game would be good for interested in playing the game, because there's just these like cute sheep discs. And for some reason, hexagons are the cutest shape. I would sort of posit that here. On top of it, Battleship is a really good game. If you've played Hey, That's My Fish, it is very reminiscent of that, but I think I personally prefer Battleship. I believe this is on Board Game Arena, if I'm not mistaken. A really, really solid game that I'm glad I have in my collection. It is very cute. Battleship.
My number 4 cutest game is Takenoko. This is an adorable, accessible game about a panda that eats bamboo. It is a very bright colored board where you're stacking bamboo pieces on top of each other in bright green, yellow, and pink. So the board alone looks great when you just see these brightly colored hexes, and hexes are pretty cute, Callan.
Thank you, Neil.
And stacks of bamboo. And then you add on that this adorable, cute panda miniature that is walking around eating this bamboo. That is extremely, extremely cute.
I think Takenoko probably is, for a generation of gamers, the one that comes to mind when you say like cute board games. I think that for me, even the insert being pink, there's something about just that like this is more playful, like this is cuter than that. Like I really do think that someone could look at this game who might not play board games and say, I will try Takenoko because of what I'm looking at here. This is crazy.
You know what's better than stacking bamboo, though? Stacking camels. And that's why Camel Up and the superior Camel Up cards are my pick for the 4th cutest
the hill you're going to
game.
die on.
That's right. Of all time. I mean, camel meeples. That's all you need to know. Again, the colors are very bright. And, you've got the pyramid. If you want to go Camel Up, you've got the pyramid, which is super, super adorable. If you want to go Camel Up cards and try the superior version, you've got a little fox, you've got a little palm tree. The artwork across the board has this very cartoony, cute style to it. Camel Up cards. Play both and tell me which one you prefer. But enjoy them both because they're both cute.
They're both good, right?
They're both
That's
good.
important. Yeah,
one is better.
My number 4 game is a game that we already covered today, Mountain Goats. Part of the reason that we made this list, the Mountain Goats game uses goat meeple shapes. So it is the classic wood in 5 different player colors with goats. And the board itself is also lovely. I think that the production, again, like for me, the smallness of the box adds to the cuteness of the whole production of the package. These goats are adorable, though I am now concerned because my 4th and 5th games were goats and sheep.
My number 3 cutest game is Patchwork. I feel like I treaded on this a little bit with Calico in retrospect, but Patchwork is, again, just in this adorable aesthetic that very much leans into the quilt side of this, where as you're building this quilt from your polyomino tiles, you're collecting buttons, and then you trade in the buttons to get more patches. That is like kind of the entirety of the aesthetic, is building your quilt, collecting buttons, and trying to do this efficiently before the other player does. It is just an adorable 2-player game that I think, again, like Kellen was saying about Takenoko, I think a lot of people look at kind of the art and the aesthetic of Patchwork and what looks like a relatively simple game made out of like puzzle pieces that look very accessible and think like, oh, I could play this. This looks cool. Could you please teach it to me? Please, Neelan, play Patchwork with me.
I've given away copies of Patchwork to non-gamers, I think, for that very reason. Very, very accessible theme to a certain type of person. That person is not me, but it does exist.
One thing you can also do to make Patchwork incredibly cute, the buttons that come in the box are just these little cardboard chits, but I've seen people bling out their kits with real blue buttons, and highly recommend that.
What did you do with the cardboard buttons that you had left over?
I put them in a bag and kept them under my bed with my inserts, obviously. In case I needed to trade it away.
You should replace your real buttons with them on your coat.
Oh, yeah, I could have done that, actually.
You see?
Yeah, all the coats I bought to get the blue buttons.
That would be legendary if you showed up to a con with buttons on your shirt from Patchwork cardboard.
In 2004, Alan Moon created a game you might have heard of, Ticket to Ride. Anyone? The next year, he grew on that success by releasing the not as well known, but third cutest game of all time, Walk the Dogs. Walk the Dogs is a family game. I say that to try to be as kind as possible about how interesting the game is, because it may not be, but it has 63 dog minis in it. What more could you ask for? Case closed.
Oh, no. These are
63.
These are like toys that you would get as a child.
Yes.
But there's just 63 of them.
You want pugs, you got pugs. You want poodles, you got poodles. You want shih tzus, you got shih tzus. Terriers, terriers. Golden retrievers, Pomeranians, 7 different breeds, 63 dog minis. How could you beat it? You can't. And yet I have 2 more games that are better.
I'm convinced that some of these games come about because they accidentally ordered too many from China and like needed something to do. They're like, oh, damn, we've got 50,000 pug figures. Oh, my God. This is crazy. You should look this up. I didn't think this was real, but it is.
Looking at I think the thing I find amazing about it is that the look of those minis is exactly like the 80s and 90s knickknacks. It is exactly that in board game form.
You're damn straight. You know what you do to set up this game? You line them all up in a line. You got a line and 63 dogs right there in front of you. What more could you ask for? You want to talk about table presents? Neelan, you want to talk about table presents? 63 dogs in a line. Come on now.
All right, the number 3 cutest board game of all time. You did not expect to get through this list without stopping at Oink Games. And this is Startups. Startups is one of my favorite Oink games, and I can't speak enough to how the production lends to the whole. Startups uses a like lime green and pink color scheme on the exterior of the front of the box, and then on the box itself inverts that and makes it pink with the lime green accents. And so it's just a very inviting production. And then you go into the cards, which are all these fake corporations that have adorable illustrations, like Bow Wow Games, which is a video game controller with ears instead of sort of the L and R buttons, and Octo Coffee, which is a octopus holding a coffee mug. And these corporations sort of come to life in this little cute, almost thematic way, you know, to the point that I have an Octo coffee mug that I purchased from Oink Games. I do think that all Oink Games are buoyed by being in the small box. I could probably have come up with a way to put 5 more of them on the list, but Startups for me is the one that, as a physical object, I look at it and say, wow, that's cute. It's maybe not in the exact same way that I think about some of these other games, but really just a marvel to me and something I could never get rid of. I don't know how to say it beyond that. Like it has this sort of extra twist beyond just a board game for me, just a fabulous, cute thing. Startups from Oink Games.
My second cutest game of all time is one I wonder if Kellen will remember, is Echidna Shuffle. We played this at Gen Con.
What? Repeat that?
Echidna Shuffle. And Echidna is, I guess...
Yeah, Mark, where were you?
Yeah.
I missed out on Echidna. I was playing Walk the Dog.
So echidnas are like little like hedgehoggy things that I think are Australian animals, if I'm not mistaken. But echidnas are adorable. But the echidnas in Echidna Shuffle are incredibly adorable because they're these really big, like plastic echidnas that are like, I would say just look this up, but they just kind of have this kind of like overblown feel to them. Like they don't feel like spindly, they just feel like big and fluffy. But these big plastic pieces that you move around this board, and what you're trying to do is kind of just move them around, collecting your bugs to deliver them to your tree stump, but they can only move in one direction around these paths. So as you move the echidna, you're kind of blocking off routes from other players. It's a pretty simple, like, abstract strategy game, but it lives and dies on just how adorable because of how big it is. It's so much bigger than it needs to be just because of how giant these little echidnas that you're moving around the board are.
For those like me, Neelan, who are trying to take your advice and looking this game up, can you spell Echidna?
Absolutely. So that's Echidna.
Okay.
And this is like, imagine each echidna is like a rubber duck sized thing. Like it's like absurd. And you can put like little butterflies on them that you're like carrying around.
Oh my God. That is cute.
Isn't that cute?
That is super cute. Yeah, that's super cute. That game seems like to be like all about cuteness, basically.
Pretty much. I have to say, like, we did not come away thinking, like, I must own Echidna Shuffle or anything like that. But it is very striking
It was close.
just how adorable it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is
And,
Echidna Shuffle.
I bought a few copies for Neelan's children.
They didn't print enough to cover all the kids.
Yeah.
My number 2 really could be number 1. And, we gave all these lists to Christina before we go on the show to make sure there isn't any overlap. And I was surprised that mine hung at number 2 because I feel like this is like the answer to the cutest game around. And it also is a nice combination of cute and a very, very good game. This is Phil Walker Harding's Sushi Go. Sushi Go is a super, super adorable game, a solid game that is as accessible as it is cute, and it makes for a great game to introduce to those who may not be quote-unquote gamers. Just super adorable. Anthropomorphic sushi, super adorable.
Okay. I have to object. I know that I'm the objector.
Oh, my God.
Okay. There's something unsettling
Oh, my God.
about anthropomorphic sushi.
Oh, you can eat them. They
Yeah,
want to
but
be eaten.
the fish were alive at one point, and then we just re-added eyes to them for our own pleasure.
Yeah, it's very pleasurable.
I think I get what you're saying a little bit, but I will admit this was lower down on my list, so I am 100% on board with the idea that this is a very, very cute game. But you did just remind me of something that traumatized me as a kid, where I don't know if this was a popular movie, but young Sherlock Holmes, there's a scene where they're all like tripping out on nightmares, and the food starts to like attack them, and that gave me nightmares when I was a kid. So you're suddenly like making me feel like, yeah, maybe this idea of like food coming alive isn't exactly that appealing.
You don't like the idea of taking little wasabi guy with his eyes and like smearing him on little sashimi guy and
me, Mom, eat me.
That's right, exactly. Adorable. And that is why Sushi Go is my second cutest game of all time.
I do think you're dead on. I think Takenoko and Sushi Go are the first things that come to mind for like the hardcore of the hardcore for this topic. The number 2 cutest board game of all time is a game called Yura Penguin. This is a real thing. I'm going to show it to them here. This is a holographic game about stacking penguins. So this is a take on Super Rhino Hero Battle, except it's adorable. Literally, I can't speak enough to this production. There are a bunch of penguin meeples that have custom paint on them with different faces and personalities. There is a ton of holographic cards in this box. You open the box, and there is a penguin that says, "Thank you for playing," and he's like looking up at you. Dear God, on the outside of the box. And then on the inside of the box lid, it's like teaching you about all the penguins in the game and where the emperor penguin comes from and where he lives. This is probably the cutest little penguin production I have ever seen. I have only played a solo game of Yura Penguin, so it does remain to be seen on how good it is in a multiplayer setting, but I do have it set aside. I love holographic, and I do think it contributes to the cuteness. There's a little bit of like Lisa Frank, but was that holographic, or am I just thinking of Pokemon cards? Lisa Frank. Did you have that,
I
Neelan?
don't know what that is.
Google that.
Lisa Frank.
You're going to lose your mind right now on the cuteness.
I mean, yeah, this is an aesthetic.
Wow. Mark, do you know what this is?
I do know. Yeah.
Okay. This is an American thing.
But like, is it just like a designer? I don't know what I'm looking at.
Oh, it was a very popular, like, to have your notebooks and your binders and, your pencil case to be Lisa Frank, or you get it at, like, the book fair. And that is my number 2 cutest board game of all time, Yura Penguin.
Penguin meeples are extremely adorable, which is why the number 1 cutest game of all time not only includes penguin meeples, but includes a bunch of other little animal meeples. It is New York Zoo. If you want to collect all these little adorable, tiny little wooden animal meeples and like have this giant bag of them where there's just like so many of them, you can just like put your hands in them and dig out little animal meeples and assemble them and put them in your little park and see their cute little clumps as you put them in cages. We'll gloss over that part a little bit, but it's all for the good of the public who want to see these adorable, cute creatures. New York Zoo is a very cool blend of kind of animal breeding, which as we all know is as cute as
Super
animals
cool.
can get, and polyomino laying. But yeah, I think the aesthetic, the soft pastel colors of New York Zoo, and just seeing all these little animals, the little foxes and the flamingos and the penguins and the meerkats. Oh my god, the meerkat meeples. It like brings you everything that you love about the meeples in something like an Agricola, but they're just cute. They're all the cutest animals, and the game is just about collecting them and trading them off to other zoos. That is New York Zoo. God, it's adorable.
You want to talk about meeples? You want to talk about ceramic meeples? The cutest game of all time is Poseidon's Kingdom. This is a sort of hard to find game that is actually a really solid game with huge anthropomorphic sea creatures. You've got starfish and sharks and clams that are these massive ceramic pieces. It's crazy. It's like overproduced to the nth degree. And it's even got translucent dice that has a really interesting component where you're putting them on this wave board, and there's a dexterity element where you're tipping the dice over and they're splashing onto the board, and depending on where the dice go on the board, it affects the game state. So it's even like dynamic in its cuteness. It's a massive game because of all these big pieces. But if you get a chance to play Poseidon's Kingdom, I would certainly recommend checking it out for the interesting gameplay and also for the amazing, huge ceramic sea creature meeples.
I love this. I've never seen like a game that just like leans into like an aesthetic for its miniatures like this does.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Looks a bit like a bad illustration that you'd have in your bathroom.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Like, but as a game, like I'm not. That's not an insult.
Yeah.
Like I actually like. It's kind of fun. Like Neil mentioned, it's leaning into it. Like it's saying this is what it is.
Right.
This is a crazy game. Poseidon's Kingdom. All right, the moment we have all been waiting for. We have saved the best for last. The number one cutest board game personality of all time, Christina, the blue tank. All right. Yeah, she's
Not around. Okay.
That's a little cute little. Okay.
Yeah.
The number one cutest board game of all time is the 2-player version of Agricola. Agricola, all creatures big and small. This is the perfect ratio. Clemens Franz as an illustrator, I'm like 50-50 on. And in full Agricola, like, wow, you've got this art everywhere. In All Creatures Big and Small, you have an overloaded box full of animeeples. You've got your sheep. You've got your horses. You've got your horses, cows, and boars. I don't know. There's a lot of cute animals in this game. There's something about the package. It's small. The ratio, it's adorable. It has that warm, cozy cup of coffee on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Not night. Night is dark, not cute. Afternoon, cute. Agricola, All Creatures Big and Small. It's also a fantastic game. Really, really exquisite 2-player game.
I agree with you. This is the one time where the Clemens Franz art really, really works. Like, it just lends the whole thing the specific, like, children's book aesthetic to it, which I think is great. It's almost got like a Fisher-Price kind of feel, just all in all.
Yeah, it just works for some reason when it doesn't always work for me everywhere else. And that is going to do it for the top 15 cutest board games of all time. You heard it here, a definitive list. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. You can find us on all major forms of social media. You can find us at boardgamebarrage.com, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Patreon, and in our Discord. You can come disagree with us. Present us cuter board games at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. That would be a great relief. That would make the Discord. Let's elevate the conversation of the Discord. Let's post cute board games together. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening, and good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been a public broadcast of BGB. I don't know. How do they sign off? I haven't watched the news in like 5 years.
Yeah, same.
Does anyone watch the news
I
anymore?
watch it occasionally. I don't know if there's a sign off. I think it's just a good night.
Old person. Right, hitting record. So, okay. Top 5 countdown cutest games with First, we're going to talk about nations with Neelan. Oh, that's perfect. Mountain goats.
That's what you want. You want as much alliteration as possible.
Dear.
Brew with Bamark.
Brew.
No Laker game spoilers, Neelan.
I'm bursting at the seams to tell someone about the Laker game, Mark.
Mark.
Lakers, sorry.
Yeah,
You know my last name.
I know.
What did you think about
you're
that?
Plugged in. You're plugged in.
I'm very plugged in.
Yeah,
Right at the owner's box. That's where I'm recording this from.
that's right. That's right. It's like Magic Johnson, you, Kobe Bryant,
Yeah.
with the famous Lakers.
Because it is the 175th episode, it is special because I, Kellen the Green Tank, am hosting, joined by Mark and Neelan.
I think
Did
just
you do that
referred
on
to yourself
purpose?
as the green tag.
Oh, you can't use this, Mark. You're going to use
I'm
it.
going to use it.
What are you spilling food on my pants?
That was the best. You have to use that.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry about it.
Do the worst thing you can think of with it.
Take your food. What are you just leaving it?
I was trying to cheers, but I had a I was trying to go like this, but I had a burrito in my hand.
Okay. This episode is a special. I, Kellen the Green Tank. I, Kellen the Green Tank. I, Kellen the Green Tank. The Green Tank. The Green Tank. The Green Tank.